Hello, welcome to another episode of Hollywood 97 where we discuss what's the internal temperature of a tauntaun, and it is lukewarm. I'm your host, the X-Man,
Fan Magic.
North Ronan.
and today's movie we are going to talk about the 1981 King Arthur epic, The Green Knight. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to be talking about Excalibur, The Green Knight Before the Green Knight, directed by John Borman. So let's get into our personal history with that movie. So I'll go first. I don't have that much of a history with the movie. I saw it once in when I was about 16, 17 on TV. Kind of forgot about it. Then earlier this summer, I've been talking to a comic book artist, and he brought up Excalibur, and it piqued my interest again. So that's pretty much my history of the movie. I saw it once, forgot about it. Now I've seen it 3 times in my life. You guys?
So for me, I never really had much. I really had a history at all with this movie.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I remember from this movie ever was that my middle school teacher showed a scene from this movie because we were reading Sword and Stone, the book.
Mm-hmm.
And while watching this movie, I noticed a lot. I actually remembered like a lot of the parts from Sword and Stone where like Sword and Stone had some aspects that were like left out of this movie, but there were also like parts of this movie that were left out of Sword and Stone, the
Right.
book, the version we had at school. So like it was really interesting, just like just like revisit that again because honestly, like I think the story of like King Arthur is actually like really interesting
Right.
in general. So like, and there's a lot of lore to it, a lot of lore behind it, and a lot of like different interpretations. So it was definitely really cool to see this again, or really cool to see this for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what really stood out about this, ironically, I think, is the fact that there wasn't much special about how they were telling it. It was a very straightforward telling of essentially the entire Arthurian legend and saga, all within the span of a single feature film. It's an epic with very lofty ambitions that it does pull off for the most part.
Right. I think.
And
All right, go ahead.
I had only really seen this movie in reference from other people talking about the story of King Arthur and Excalibur. And I had only ever caught a bit of this movie on demand
Mm.
when I was, I want to say, 12, and still very much into swords and sorcery, which, well, I still am.
To me, I think if I have a hot take with this movie, to me, I think this is the most definitive King Arthur movie. Even like King Arthur movies before, like after this film, because there's like a dozen King Arthur films. I think, and most recently we just had the King Arthur movie, The Green Knight, that just came out this summer. And to me, I think this and The Green Knight are my favorite Arthurian legend films because there is a lot of King Arthur movies which I never understood, and there is a lot of Robin Hood films, and I just never found them. They just never made the story of King Arthur as interesting to me. I always just found them really fucking boring. Like the most boring one I think was Camelot from the 1960s, but this one was very. It made it entertaining. It's my Game of Thrones basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Like the only other King Arthur movie I remember ever seeing was the Disney one,
Yeah, the Sword in the
the
Stone.
Disney Sword in the Stone,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
that one I think I haven't seen the movie in so long, so I forgot most of it. But like from memory, it mostly focused on Arthur as a kid. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in this movie, they kind of like just skimmed over that, which I'm actually fine with because I think the whole childhood part is actually like not that interesting.
Right.
And it's really more about the actual like legend. And actually, what I do like about the childhood part though is that his stepdad and stepbrother, in the Disney movie, they kind of portrayed, from my to my memory, they kind of portrayed the stepfather and like stepbrother to be very like arrogant and like
they were kind
not
of
very well treating to Arthur. Well, in this one, they respect him just like their own family, and I think that's actually a really cool and interesting take. Like when Arthur pulls the stone, at first, like the stepbrother about to lie and say that he pulled it, but then he goes, "No, Arthur pulled it." Like,
yeah, that is also how I had read the scene when I had first read the story, and I thought that was a much stronger way for them to interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole point is half the kingdom doesn't really respect Arthur as a boy king, as is probable. And like just about any real medieval king, he does have to spend the first bit of his rule quelling rebellions and consolidating his empire.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing I wanted to say, how people don't notice this movie is kind of a major, how inspirational the movie is, like visually, because this film came out like during that early 80s craze of fantasy films. Like you had films like that were coming out at the same time, like Conan the Barbarian, The Dark Crystal, Dragon Slayer, and like Lady Hawk and stuff like that. And I feel like this is like there was like that whole early 80s craze of fantasy film. And it's like, I feel like this was one of the more visually influential movies. Like you can see you can see imagery from the manga Berserk coming from this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like in terms of like the gore, the costumes, like the spikes all the knights wear, even the scene where they show like the corpse hanging from the tree. Like I instantly recognize that from Berserk.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it was also a bit of a rare rated R fantasy movie from the 80s, because I think at that time they still very much considered fantasy to be, I think, something for younger audiences.
I think Conan the Barbarian was rated R, but I know like the Dark Crystal was rated PG, even though a lot of people were complaining that it was too scary for kids. Yeah. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, it's called the Dark Crystal. That just sounds malevolent, parents.
Yeah.
And it was, yeah, go ahead.
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say like and shit, I kind of forgot what I was going to say. Go ahead.
But when you look at Arthurian films from before this, like, and fantasy films in general, like going off what you were saying, North Ronan, like before the 80s, they were like, you look at fantasy films before then, like in the 60s and the 50s, they were mainly clean looking. You know, they were like these clean looking heroic fantasies, and like I feel like when you get to films like, you know, like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, you get like which is an Arthurian legend movie, you get like a more grittier look.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that also like influenced stuff like Game of Thrones visually later on. I mean, George R. Martin must have like watched this movie like a million times.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think even commenting on Monty Python, they understood, as the makers of Excalibur understood, even if it's a joke, any good epic is visually striking.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why something like a parody movie of this legend will still fulfill kind of the basic elements needed for the story.
Right.
Now it needs to be told.
And I think the director John Borman, he understood the assignment. Like John Borman, he's probably both the best and worst director from the 70s because he directed one of my personal favorite movies, Deliverance, which is also considered to be one of the greatest movies of the 70s, but he also directed stuff like Daredevil and the second Exorcist movie, and apparently on the shooting locations were the same as Zarda for Excalibur. And how Excalibur was coming and came about was because he was going to direct a version of Lord of the Rings from the 60s, and I read some of the script from that, and it was like a really weird sexual version of Lord of the Rings, and then it became Excalibur, and like you can if you read the script from his Lord of the Rings and Excalibur, you can like see a lot of the stuff like from Lord of the Rings delve into Excalibur.
Mm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And let's talk about the actors. Like what I noticed, like the actors, the people who are in it are some of like the most famous British actors of all time.
Yeah.
Like you have Patrick Stewart. You know, I don't care how early in his movie career it might be. Patrick Stewart will always look the same, and his voice will always sound the same to me. Like I can always count. Like that's Patrick Stewart.
Yep.
And you also have
I,
like
oh yeah, go ahead.
you also have like Liam Neeson playing the Green Knight in this movie. Like there's a
Oh, yes.
yeah, like there's a
A
scene.
very different Gawain.
Yeah, actually, I feel like his because Gawain is supposed in the Arthurian legend supposed to be like really arrogant. I feel like there is a little smidget of Dave Patel's performance in Liam Neeson's. Like
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
well, I think Dev Patel in The Green Knight is also a story of arrogance,
Yeah,
only a more subtle kind, whereas in this instance, Gawain was more just a story element for the larger plot of the affair between Lancelot and Guinevere.
right. I feel like there were a little bit of reference to the Legend of the Green Knight in that scene where he's like accusing Guinevere.
Mm.
And the guy who played I think the best actor was the guy who plays Merlin, though.
Oh yeah, I think he's great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
Ron was great in this movie.
yeah. I like his outfit. It looks really corny. Like he looks more like a supervillain than a withered archetype.
Yeah, the silver helmet of silver bald helmet just looks straight out of Flash Gordon, as well as just his hokey humor, but it was welcome humor.
Yeah.
Like, if anyone in the Arthurian story is going to have a sense of humor, it's probably going to be the all-knowing warlock,
Yeah.
cursed with knowledge of the worlds and must make merry when he can.
Had you noticed that every bit of dialogue Merlin says, he's literally just describing the entire movie?
Yeah, no, actually, I wanted to get to that too. Like, I think the foreshadowing in this film is actually pretty amazing. To be honest. Like,
it's like you never even noticed it.
yeah, because no, like actually, one foreshadowing I actually didn't notice until I finished the movie and I was about to go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically so this is where we're gonna get to like major spoiler territories, but I'm pretty sure everyone's seen this movie.
I mean, the movie's 40 years old now. You all seen it? No, I'm joking. Go ahead.
Yeah. So like so basically the beginning of the film, Uther, I think his name is, like Arthur's father. Basically, the reason why the allying forces turn, the reason why the nations split was because he started going after the wife of the other kingdom.
Yeah.
And it caused the split, and is the reason why Merlin took away Arthur.
Right.
Meanwhile, when Arthur becomes king, Guinevere has an affair with Lancelot.
You're right.
And after Arthur discovers that, that's when Arthur's downfall begins, because he falls into depression, and that's when Camelot starts to fall apart and poverty rises again, and of course comes Mordred and whatnot. So I think that was actually really cool.
Yeah, it's just like I had to, when I rewatched this movie a few months ago again for the second time, I had to pay attention to the dialogue and notice oh yeah, he's really laying it out all there.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of Uthar in the prologue of the movie, how are you nailing somebody while wearing all that armor?
Yeah.
I just thought that was just extremely funny.
Yeah.
Apparently,
I also really like how Uther is Arthur's almost polar opposite.
Yeah.
Being his father, Uther is a dick. Uther is a straight up dick in the movie. He's completely arrogant. He doesn't care for others. The only person he cared about is the woman he loved.
Eventually,
I guess, yeah. And then basically,
Merlin was right not to call it love. He said,
"Yeah,
your lust will cost you."
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, which I thought was really cool. And again, that's something that was actually missing from the book I read in middle school, and obviously from Sword and Stone, the Disney movie. So that's an aspect of the story I never heard about, and I think is actually really interesting, and actually adds a lot more to Arthur's character. I think, because it just showed that Arthur is better than his father.
Right.
Just about every way possible.
I think what makes Arthur, the actor who played Arthur, I felt, especially when he's younger, is a little boring. But I feel like this was the first movie to show King Arthur and his time, that he wasn't, that even though King Arthur is not a real person, but he was always portrayed as more of a pure-hearted character. But here, I feel like they portray him more as a gray character. And I feel like that a lot of King Arthur movies after this one start to take on that characterization. Even the whole medieval era of King Arthur take more of that characterization.
Well, I think what this movie is trying to portray, that we basically get to see Arthur's whole story. Whole story. We get to see him grow. And the thing is, Arthur, just like everyone else, is a person. He is not some godlike being. He has his ups and downs, and he has his emotions. And I think the main theme is basically Arthur, in the end, well, in a way, I guess he wasn't the best husband according to Guinevere.
Mm-hmm.
He was a better king than a better husband.
Yeah.
And that's because his role was to be king. He even said himself that he has to be a king first before husband.
Yeah, at the very end.
And I think again, the whole point of Arthur is to be a leader. And I think that's why, and that's why I think he comes off as gray, very gray at times, because when you're a leader, you have to make decisions, and not every decision is going to have a perfect outcome for everyone.
Right.
And that's just that's not just in movies, but in real life too. Everything a leader does, there's going to be some kind of consequence for the most part.
Right.
So you have to become gray. But yeah, and I think as for his performance, I think the young version of him, I think, is a little bit iffy at times. I won't lie, but I feel towards the end of the movie, especially when he's an older man, when he's gray haired, I think that's when Arthur was actually his best.
Yeah,
because I feel that was when he genuinely felt he was a complete character. I feel
yeah, and
it was when
whole like growth.
Yeah. It is when he's been tested by his various struggles as a king.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's only under adversity that his character, his moral character, falters, whereas his father pretty much blew everything right when everything was working out for him, when he secured peace, but then decided to refuse it because he couldn't keep it in his pants.
Right.
Yeah, actually, I actually want to say, like, another thing I noticed is that basically, I just noticed this as you were saying that, like, Uther is the main difference between Uther and Arthur is that Uther is selfish.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Arthur, in many ways, is actually selfless. Like, he wanted
To be a
like
noble
Arthur
king.
wanted to create a utopia
Yeah.
for everyone. Like, he wanted a place where everyone had like, you know, basically had just about equal rights, and everyone can be tried for justice. There was no bias. Like, even during the trial, the reason why, you know, he didn't, like, you know, just straight up say the man is guilty or the knight is guilty is, despite, you know, it being against his wife, is because he needed the man deserves a free trial.
Right.
And I think that's also, and I think that's what I think that basically just embodies what Arthur is. Arthur wanted to create a utopia now, and by the end, it's, you know, the truth is that's almost impossible. Like, something is going to happen. There will always be some form of evil in the world. Like, Arthur can't erase evil, but he will do everything in his power to rise above it. And I think that's what made. And I think that's what makes Arthur, like, a really, you know, like, interesting character and a very, like, you know, like, I don't want to say I guess wholesome, but, like, I don't know how to say it, but, like, I don't know what the word to look for, but, like, basically he just wants to do everything in his power to make the world a better place, I guess.
Mm.
Or to make Camelot a better place.
I want to go back to the Guinevere and Lancelot subplot. So, like, again, this movie, it's like we've been saying, it's a definitive version of the whole Arthurian legend, and it's told through, like, vignettes and stuff like that. I felt like the part that did drag a little bit is the romantic subplot with Guinevere and Lancelot. And, you know, even though that's, like, the most famous part of Arthurian legend, but I just felt like that part dragged, and that was already the basis of a whole other movie, Camelot, and Excalibur boiled it down to like 20 minutes to show it wasn't that interesting in the first place.
Yeah. Because I think, I mean, I didn't feel like it really dragged. I felt like it kind of showed where it needed to show.
Mm-hmm.
Could have been shorter, maybe, but, like, I feel like, again, I feel like it kind of, like, showed what it needed to show. Basically, like, you know, Lancelot feels great guilt for falling in love with Guinevere, and Arthur, while he is definitely upset about it, he can't come to himself to, like, you know, hurt or kill either Guinevere or Lancelot for it.
Right. I want to...
So
yeah, go ahead.
Oh.
No, go ahead.
So it basically... Oh.
No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, so basically, like, and it's the reason why Arthur holds in this pent up, like, you know, sadness that, you know, he basically lost both Guinevere and his most trusted knight, and is when, you know, the fall of Camelot starts.
Yeah, I think it's a major subplot. Just for me, it just felt like it just dragged a little too much. But yeah, it's a major subplot.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to, like, the acting. Like, everyone hams it up. Everybody hams it up in this movie.
Yeah.
The sword of power!
Yeah, like, not one single person is talking in a quiet tone in this movie.
Yeah, and at first I actually really hated it, to be honest. Like
Mhm.
the beginning of the movie, I was like, "Are these guys just overacting?" And then I realized, "Oh wait, it's supposed to be like that."
Yeah.
And
Yep,
at first I was like,
that's the tone.
I'm not sure if I like this, but like eventually I was like, I can't say I love it, but it's like I'll deal with it.
I mean,
Yeah. To the modern viewer, it's part of the hokiness and charm.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I mean, I think for a fantasy movie of the early '80s, it's not super out of place. And there are other like corny stuff about this movie. Like I recognize there's like a scene where there's a shot of Camelot in the foreground, and like you can obviously tell Camelot is superimposed in the woods.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's only a model.
Yeah.
Camelot.
Even some of like Morgan Lee Fay's outfit, like I was just ripping on Merlin's outfit. Even some of Morgan Lee Fay's outfit looks
Yeah.
ridiculous. Like it almost
Yeah.
looked out of place for a medieval fantasy.
Like,
Yeah.
I think like her final scene, that outfit was just like, wow.
Yeah.
This was,
I was like, yep.
yeah, it's clearly an 80s interpretation
Yeah.
of a sorcerer seductress.
Oh, also Mordred's outfit. Like I thought, like that was just like,
Oh, yes.
Oh, you know what's funny? Okay, you know what that golden suit remind me of?
what?
So I don't know if you
Besides
guys have...
C-3PO?
No. I was gonna bring that up, but I don't know if you guys have seen the Met Gala in the last few weeks. But
Oh, yes.
Little Nas
yeah.
Little Nas X wore this golden suit, and because I watched this movie twice this summer, I instinctively keep thinking of Mordred's golden suit.
Yep.
Everyone keeps saying either Metropolis or C-3PO, but for me, no, it's the year of Excalibur, baby.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I thought that suit was. I mean, I think this movie like I said, this movie visually is one of the best looking fantasy films of all time. I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Like I think they really did try to put their research into the medieval time. And I think some of the stuff are like some of the stuff like the spikes on the knights and stuff like that are a little made up, but like I think I think it's still one of the best looking movies. It's just some of the outfits are really corny looking.
Yeah. I mean, I think, but they're charmingly corny. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's still a believable world that they illustrate in this way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, what else I wanted to bring up? Yeah.
I don't know. I can't read your mind.
I think what was one of my favorite movie scenes is the Or Fortuna scene, the one that they play at the very end when they're riding out to the final battle.
Oh yeah.
I think that's a great scene.
So much ode to Fortuna.
Yeah. I think the final battle scene when they're riding out to the final battle where Or Fortuna plays and you like see like the flowers light up and all that stuff. I think that's probably one of my favorite movie scenes now.
Yeah. That scene is really good. There are actually a lot of like really cool scenes in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was like, really good.
I think the battle in the beginning in the prologue is really good also.
Oh yeah, that was really good too. The battle in the prologue, that was great.
I feel like, not to disregard the rest of the movie, I feel like my other favorite part is the first 20 minutes of that movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It sets the whole tone.
Yeah.
Right there. It knows how to create a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
My only problem with the final battle is maybe it's probably the DVD I own, but I could barely kind of see anything because they had fog around the whole battle and it was just like different camera cuts around it, so I feel like I couldn't really see it much. I mean, it's not. Yeah, go ahead.
it was part of the plot. Like, oh, the fog is giving us cover.
Yeah. It's no Lord of the Rings, but like I wish I could see more. Like clearer.
Yeah. I mean, I think my biggest, I guess, like pet peeve with the final battle is that we barely, well, like the battle between like Arthur and Mordred is very short.
Yeah.
It kind of just ends, and it's like, oh, okay.
Because Mordred only is introduced in like the last 30 minutes.
Yeah.
You know the director's son that plays Mordred?
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Huh.
his kid, the
That's
kid
really cool.
version, the kid version.
The kid version, right?
Yeah, and actually, the lady that plays Arthur's mom in the beginning is his daughter.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a really weird thing to think about.
That's actually really think about. Yeah, that's really what to think about, huh?
Yeah, apparently in an audio commentary, John Borman said his daughter was cool with it. Okay, bro. And
Yeah.
his other daughter played the lady. Yeah.
The 80s.
And
So many things flew.
his other daughter played the lady in the water.
Huh.
Yeah. So it was a whole ring of nepotism.
Wow.
So yeah. So I think my only thing is that the movie was a little too long, but like what me and North Ronan were discussing, and he made a good point. That's kind of, it's a medieval fantasy, so it's gonna be a little bit longer.
Yeah, like I mean, it's trying to tell the whole story of King Arthur, so the length doesn't really surprise me. My main issue with the movie, I think, is really the pacing especially at the beginning.
Yeah, I think
because I feel like I think like the time skip, it kind of like my main issue with the time skip is when Arthur fights Lancelot, because we see a side of Arthur that we didn't see previously, where he's very aggressive and even like plays dirty by using Excalibur's power to beat Lancelot.
Right.
It was a strange transition.
Yeah, I mean, I love the scene where he, tells like Merlin that he failed the sword because he used the sword in a dishonest way. I think that scene is great, but like it's just used way too quickly. I think like we didn't have any like indication of when Arthur, became hot headed.
Right.
And it's just a very out of character for him, because even like when he was still Kid Arthur, he wasn't very hot headed. He was very noble, very. I mean, he even managed to get a enemy soldier to basically join his side because of his noble.
Yeah, and
that was a very well written scene.
Yeah,
and as I recalled in that scene in the actual Arthurian legend, that's once he broke the sword. That's actually when he gets Excalibur, because the sword in the stone wasn't Excalibur in the legend.
Right. It was kind of a training. It was almost, okay, this is your training, Excalibur.
Right.
And if you be a good boy and don't break it, you'll get a really wicked blade.
And every time this is just the weeb in me, but every time when I think of Excalibur, I go back to Soul Eater. Because there's because Excalibur shows up in that also.
Every time I think of Excalibur, I think of Fate.
Oh yeah.
Anime Fate, Excalibur, basically.
Right.
Well, I suppose Excalibur makes us all think of Fate. I mean, it's linked to the entire Kingdom of England, and the soul of the Empire is at stake.
Yep.
All over this blade.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is indeed a keeper of fate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm certain I'm not misinterpreting this at all.
Yeah.
So I give this movie a 4 out of 5.
Yeah,
Like,
I think about the same. Like, I think I honestly enjoy this movie a lot more than I thought I would.
mhm,
But I will agree there are some like distinctive flaws to it that I think need to be addressed.
right.
But overall, I really enjoyed this movie. Like, I was actually very shocked by how good it was.
Yeah,
And
yeah, go ahead.
I don't know. I'm actually like I'm a sucker for these kind of stories too. Like, I'm a sucker for good foreshadowing and like the story of growth.
Mhm.
So I think like yeah, this film kind of like just hit like all the sweet spots are that for me. So yeah, definitely a 4 out of 5 for me.
Yeah. I would say the same thing because I'm not the biggest fantasy person, but this was actually a pleasant surprise because
Yeah.
despite the pacing and the length of it, I actually really did enjoy it. And I
Mhm.
really I consider it, like I said in the beginning, I consider it to be the definitive King Arthur movie. Like, other than The Green Knight, no other King Arthur movie had ever really got me interested in the legend like that. And I know like a good portion of the legend. Ex-
Yeah.
And like, I just think visually it's such a great fantasy movie and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
everyone gave their 100, but I think the 100, worked for this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this movie was everything a story of King Arthur needed to be.
Right.
It had. It seemed much simpler than it really was. It's not. But the fact that they go into the fact that the sword is a sign of nobility and good character, and that it chose Arthur for this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, that's our feelings on Excalibur.
Yep.
All right, and just like Marty, unlike Marty McFly, excuse me, we are out of time. This is Hollywood 97. I'm your host, the X Man,
And magic.
North Ronan.
and we'll get back to you guys next week. You 97ers know what to do. Hit that like button, hit the bell when we get new videos, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a good night. Adios.
All right.